Hello, I'm Daniel. I'm a meditation teacher in Kansas City, and this is my podcast, Sharpening the Mind. The teachings in this podcast are free of charge, but of course, if you feel compelled to make a donation, you can do so by clicking the link in the show notes. Hello. The title of this talk is Fearless Compassion. Fearless Compassion. So, compassion is something that we seem to all agree is important. It's fundamental to all the religions and ethical systems that I know of. We all agree that it's important, but at the same time, we very often and very clearly fall short of really cultivating it and trying to embody it. We can all agree it's really important, but at the same time, not take steps to build on it. When you see someone that needs help and you make excuses not to help them, or when you see someone being harmed and you think to yourself, they had it coming. These are examples of falling short in generating compassion. These are examples. And I'm sure we all have a few examples of that in our own lives. What is compassion really? Compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted by another being's suffering and when we feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. I will say that again. Compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted by another being's suffering and when we feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. So it's not just, oh, that's so sad. That's not compassion. Compassion's bigger than that. That's more like pity. Compassion is bigger than that. It's when you see suffering and you really want that suffering to be relieved. In his book, A Fearless Heart, the former monk and professor Thupten Jinpa says, compassion is fundamental to our basic nature as human beings. I'll read that again. Compassion is fundamental to our basic nature as human beings. It's a part of who we are. At the core of our being, we are good. We are not broken. We are not hopelessly selfish as we sometimes think we are. We are good, and compassion is our true nature. It can be easy to believe that human beings are bad, that things are awful out there, that the world is a terrible, terrible place. But I'm here to tell you that our nature is compassion. The center of our being is love. We just have layers of delusion that keep us from embodying that good, positive, true nature. We've all been kicked in the heart many times, and it has made us feel like people are out to get us, and it has made us feel like vulnerability is a weakness. And we are called to be vulnerable anyway. An open heart is so important to our spiritual journey, and opening our hearts is the way to cultivate compassion. It is. Thupten Jinpa goes on in the book A Fearless Heart to say, compassion offers the possibility of responding to suffering with understanding, patience, and kindness rather than, say, fear and repulsion. Compassion is powerful. It can take us all the way to awakening. We just have to open our hearts and be fearless and vulnerable. Open up your heart. Brene Brown said, vulnerability is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experiences. And I think that she's right. I think there's a certain amount of openness that you have to really be compassionate, to really embrace compassion. And that vulnerability is not a weakness. It's not a weakness. It's a strength. It takes a certain courage because we're afraid we'll be hurt. And that's why I say fearless compassion. That's why Thupten Jinpa's book is called Fearless Heart, A Fearless Heart, because it's about I'm ready to be vulnerable. I'm ready to show up and be open and loving and vulnerable and authentic, my real self, and see what happens rather than being closed off, hiding away, wearing sort of emotional armor. It's the undefended heart, the open heart, the fearless heart. Cultivating compassion benefits us and the world around us in many ways. Being compassionate can motivate and inspire us. It can help us deal with stress. It can help us deal with loneliness, and it can inspire others to be compassionate. I saw there's a famous quote from a Zen teacher. His student went to him and he said, "Teacher, I'm very discouraged. What should I do?" And the teacher says, "Encourage others." I think when we show compassion, even when we're struggling, if we show compassion to another person struggling, it lifts us up. It softens us a little, so we handle our own struggle a little better, I think. Compassion is a worldview that can help us have the opportunity to be home everywhere and create and strengthen communities. And again, in A Fearless Heart, Jinpa says, kindness affirms something fundamental to our human condition, our need for and appreciation of connection with our fellow humans. Compassion brings us together and connects us to other people. It brings us together in a way that few other things can. But more importantly, it penetrates the rigid walls that we put up that separate us from other people so completely. We've been kicked in the heart, like I said, so we try to put our hearts in cages. But that's not a good way to live. We can uncage our hearts instead and dare to be kind and open and authentic. Jinpa goes on to say, if we look, we will always find people who are helping in big ways or small, because it's one of the things humans were born to do. If we look, we will always find people who are helping in big ways or small, because it's one of the things humans were born to do. And this echoes a famous quote from Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. He said, when I was a boy, I would see scary things in the news, and my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. It can be easy for us to have a negative view of humanity. We see so many things that make us think people are bad. I was going to say this is especially true with the strife and division that is happening now, but it was probably true throughout human history. But we can always look for the helpers. We can always look for the people doing the good things. Big and small acts of kindness are happening all the time, and no act of kindness is too small to matter. Even holding the door for someone that's carrying things is important. Every act of kindness is important. I'm going to read you one more quote from Jinpa. I'm going to link his book in the show notes in case someone wants to get it. I really like it. So here it is. We humans haven't given ourselves enough credit, and we suffer from the self-fulfilling prophecy of selfishness. We humans haven't given ourselves enough credit, and we suffer from the self-fulfilling prophecy of selfishness. So when we look for trouble, we can find it. When we start from thinking the worst about people, we can find faults, maybe many, many faults. But what if we don't look for trouble? What if we stop looking for evidence that people are bad? How can we be confident? How can we be confident that people are good? That our true nature is compassion and wisdom? I wonder that sometimes too. Is this an article of faith? Is this what I believe in spite of evidence or with a lack of evidence? I get a lot from looking for the helpers. I get a lot from that, and that is why I believe this. That is why it's not an article of faith, or not just an article of faith. You can see selfless people all the time if you're looking for them. Also, studies show that being compassionate and seeing the world in a positive way are linked. Caring about other people brings you some measure of happiness and joy. Thinking it's a terrible world and other people are jerks all the time is just going to make you sad. I was a depressed and negative teenager before I was a positive adult, as many people are, I assume. I thought the world was awful. I thought other people were out to get me. And I hated movies with happy endings. I was that person. I was that person who would come out of a movie and say that had a happy ending. It was bad. But also, I was endlessly unhappy. I was endlessly unhappy. I saw the world as a dreadful, negative, awful place where no progress could happen, and I was unhappy. Of course I was. When I set an intention to be a more positive person, it changed everything. That's not an exaggeration. It changed everything. The truth is, compassion is more than a virtue we're trying to cultivate, it's a worldview. If you change how you see the world, you can change your life. You can change your life. And opening your heart is a path to awakening, a path to spiritual awakening. So that's it for today. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and have a good day. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.